Yeah, ready.
You moved around quite a bit in your younger years growing up. Was music something of a stabilizing influence during those times?
What kind of influence did you say? Uh,
Stabilizing.
yeah, yeah, I would say so. I think like a tether. Um, I definitely um, always found a way to kind of make it part of just about every day, really. When I was After we moved from Iowa, where I was around a lot of musicians and a lot of people playing music live together pretty frequently, and some very informally at the house or with various family get-togethers, and then also just my dad had started doing shows in little clubs around then, and I would sometimes fall asleep in the little booth in the bars, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. But after I moved with my mom down to Alabama, I was lucky enough to my mom rented a piano from a little local music company, and so I played the piano a lot. So, yeah, it was definitely one of those kind of private, inside stabilizing things.
Sure. Obviously, your dad would have been a great influence on your love of music, but I believe he wasn't totally aware that you were writing songs for quite a while.
Yeah, it's funny how all that stuff is, but I think, I didn't spend a lot of time in the same household as my dad after the age of 8. Um, and for the kind of brief There was one period when I was 11 that I lived with him for 8 or 9 months, and then one time as a teenager for about the same amount of time. But he was touring a lot. He wasn't really around that much. So I think some of it was just that kind of natural. We didn't really spend a ton of time together. So um, and I was pretty private and definitely shy about that kind of stuff, not just with him, just sort of generally speaking.
I would imagine he would have been extremely supportive of you pursuing a career in music. Would you find yourself at times running songs by him for evaluation?
I really never have done that. Isn't
No?
that wild? I mean,
Yeah.
I did when I first started playing songs, when I first kind of got my enough nerve up to try to face my shyness and other demons, and started taking songs out to try to play out. I did play some songs for my dad. I sent him a little tape cassette, and then I was home in Iowa and visiting, and I'll never forget it because I sat in the living room and sang him some songs face to face for the first time ever, and that was in my kind of early 20s. And he that was sort of when he that was the first time he realized I was even really writing songs. So
Mm.
I remember that he kind of cried, which I had not seen very often either. And then he just said, "Well, it's a blessing and a curse." That's what he said. I'll never forget it. And yeah, and he let that was my that was my advice, I guess, that
Mm.
he gave me.
I guess having witnessed his career as a musician, it's probably left you better prepared for the ups and downs of a musician's life, a traveling musician's life.
Yeah, I think kind of a lot of different sides of it. I think, of course, just having seen some of it, just watching him and uh, kind of from a distance, and then just all the moving around myself. Like I never lived in the same house for more than, I think maybe 2 years was the most we ever lived somewhere, um, until I left home. And I kept that pace going
Mm.
strongly until about 8 years ago. So yeah, I think that kind of wandering thing just made that part of the the whole thing pretty comfortable for me, really.
Do you, do you think you would have been drawn to music anyway, despite the family influence?
You can't really say, but I think, yeah, I think it's something that is from within for sure. I think anybody that would, randomly choose, like, oh, I think maybe I'll be a singer-songwriter. That sounds crazy, right? It's a really hard way to try to make it through, I think, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. But at the same time, like the inner drive is so strong for me that it's also comforting, to have that kind of passion for something gives you something to go on. So I think so. I have three three half sisters, none of whom are doing what I'm doing, and they all love music, but they're not writing songs, and they're not trying to play shows or any of that stuff. So I think it's got to be some kind of blend.
Talk a bit about your songwriting. Other than your dad, obviously, what other songwriters inspired you to write songs?
Oh man, so many. I think early on, I did so much listening. I'm such a huge music fan, and I really, really love so many kinds of music. And I think of it as loving songs, and I don't really care what kind of name you put on it, whether it's blues or country or folk or rock and roll,
Mm.
hip hop, all of it. I love music, and so I think that when I was a teenager, kind of really discovering my own musical worlds and what I loved to listen to. I listened to a lot of country blues. I got pretty far into it, and I still am. Just did a ton of listening, and that led me down all kinds of roads. Led Zeppelin, was a really big Led Zeppelin fan, um, and then I think and then that just sort of all of that music led me to so many of the great kind of established singer-songwriters that most of us that love songs and music know of. Neil Young or John Prine come to mind as sort of just two that I really love their songs. I think just their openness, and then also their craft. And then there's just, gosh, there's so many. I was influenced early on, I think, by Elizabeth Cotton.
Mm-hmm.
And just her, I remember as a kid, really young kid, really loving her sound. There was something so gentle and completely pure and true to that person sound. I can remember just listening to her record over and over and over when I was a kid. And there was a singer, she wasn't as much of a songwriter, but a singer named Jean Ritchie, who I heard a lot as a kid too, who did all these kind of Appalachian, kind of really traditional folk songs. Beautiful singer. And just hearing her sing those songs, a lot of times they would be really stripped down, or maybe sometimes just the voice singing the songs really kind of presented songs themselves as these sort of magical stories, or these kind of worlds where you could go.
You maintain a pretty busy touring schedule, a lot of the time on the road. Are you able to write while you're on tour, or is that something best left for when you're settled at home base?
Speaking of the fact that I'm coming down there to do some shows with Iris, I wrote, I don't know, maybe at least three or four songs that are on this last album, Paradise Outlaw. I wrote them in Australia on the road.
Oh, wow.
There's a song on there called Wondering How. and All My Rain. I wrote both of them. I wrote Wondering How in a hotel room in Melbourne, actually. I'm pretty sure that's where we were. And All My Rain, I also wrote on the road in Australia. So um, I have a pretty big, beaming, soft spot in my heart for Australia, so I'm excited to come back. But yeah, I think that's kind of changed for me. I think early on, I definitely I would kind of hole up I'd get the kind of open song brain feeling and hide out in my room. And at that time, though, when, I was still living alone and could really have my own world completely whenever I wanted it. And I think as, you start getting other people in on your family and all that, actually the road I've definitely been finding some songs out there.
There's a terrific storytelling element to your songwriting. What for you, obviously apart from a good story, is the key element of good storytelling in song?
That's a good question. I think for me, the way in so often to a story is trying to climb inside it and be the character, and so I know that over the years, a lot of times people have asked me about, if such and such has happened to me, or if that song is about me, and so many of my songs are actually, maybe somebody else's story that I'm trying to climb inside or that I've been really affected by. Yeah, it's a mysterious thing. I think telling a good story, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I think I'm a pretty visual person, so a lot of times for me it's kind of trying to paint the images with the words, and then also with the sounds or the melody, so that you can kind of see it almost. Or I think that's one of the things I love about songs as opposed to reading a story, is that you get that whole other, added layer of sonic texture or rhythmic texture, whatever it is, that kind of helps tell the story.
Is there a lot of editing in the songwriting process for you?
Sometimes, but I think I do a lot of that kind of in the background of my mind, sort of before it even tumbles out. I must do that because a lot of times, like I just wrote a song that I feel pretty excited about a week ago or something, and I had kind of a little line, and then I had one little line of a melody, and then I picked up my guitar, and then 15 minutes later there was the song, and I wasn't thinking about it. It just sort of stumbles out, and I don't really understand why the brain works like that or how it all works, but something about the music sort of draws the words out for me, and they kind of, not that they all line up perfectly always, but it's usually something that's coming from the music somehow, and I'll go back and try to change a thing here too. And then also once you start singing it is where a lot of editing happens, because somehow something won't sound right when you're singing the word, or it won't come out with the phrasing right with the melody.
I'm sure you've probably picked up some songwriting tips from your dad along the way, but if you had to pass on a songwriting tip to a young songwriter, what would be the main piece of advice you'd make sure you passed on?
Well, I've been asked that a couple times before, and I mean, one thing I love about my musical relationship with my dad is that he's really never told me much. It's mostly just sort of through a lot of listening and being around it and observing him. But one thing I remember being aware of really early on is that kind of like I said about Elizabeth Cotten, like my dad just sounds like my dad, and he doesn't sound like he's trying to sound like anyone else, and it's his kind of unique voice and his willingness to be really true to that, that makes it some of my, I love his songs, and I think just staying really true to whatever the inside voices are saying is one thing I would try to pass on to someone, because then you're giving something that's, coming from your heart or your head, whatever place, but that's not necessarily formulaic or something.
You mentioned your shyness earlier, and I have read other interviews where you've mentioned yourself as a shy person when you first began. Can you pinpoint a moment in time when that started to fade and the confidence started to roll in?
I think it was just after doing a lot of shows, and that's another thing I'll never understand is, I guess, just the drive to the passion for the songs and the music and connecting that way is obviously stronger than the shyness, luckily. And I really love people, so I'm not necessarily shy in terms of communicating with other people, but just sort of more shy about expressing myself, I guess. And I think it was just after doing a lot of shows and having some of those shows where you realize, you're like, oh wow, these people came out, or they came back, and they came to hear the songs, and they're just really sweet people, and they're just they're into music too. So I think it was once I started to kind of trust the audience and trust all that, it helped break down some of that. And a lot of it is just practicing it, finding the ways in which I can really be open in the moment with the music, and that gave me a lot of confidence over time too. The other thing too is when I had first started doing shows, I had only been playing guitar for, I don't even know, maybe 6 months or something. So I really didn't know what I was doing, like technically at all. I couldn't have told you what chord I was playing or anything. And so I've spent so much time with my instruments now, and that also has given me more confidence and an ability to, have a good sense of humor about the shyness and let it be all right.
There's a wonderful warm feel to your records, lovely subtleties in the production. Your songs are given plenty of room to stand up for themselves. Are you always conscious of having that quality in your recordings? Is that what you like as a listener to music yourself?
Yeah, generally speaking, I love all music that sounds. A lot of my favorite records are those records where people were recording live music together and really playing their instruments all together. So I'm a big fan of that, and I've recorded most of my albums in that way. Although the last couple have really been live all together in one room. And before that, we were playing live at the same time, but everybody was isolated in various rooms, and you had headphones on and glass between you and the drummer and stuff, but playing live all together. So I think just as I've gone along and gotten to know more about making records, just really trying to pay attention to the space that you're recording in and how much that plays into your recording. And it's definitely an ongoing process, and I've got a lot to learn still about making records, but it's something I really, really enjoy doing. And actually, the more I've done it, the more I'm into it. So I feel excited about the next endeavor.
Are you comfortable with the Americana label being placed upon your music? It seems to become a simple label that people like to place on anything that sounds earthy and rootsy these days.
Yeah. I think I like Americana better than some of them, just because it's broader. And I think I mean, another thing that people have said to me often is, that my music is hard to categorize, which makes me very happy, actually. But I think, I definitely drawing on a lot of sounds and influences that I've heard and been drawn to over the years. So I think, I don't mind Americana. I mean, I think any label will do, really. I mean, for me, it's coming so much, really, at the end of the day, about each song itself, and I can't really quite understand where they all come from exactly. So I think at least Americana is kind of a broader term than some. For a while it was roots rock, which didn't quite work to me, or folk. And I think folk is probably a very fair label as well. Although so often these days, I think people think of folk as kind of a certain kind of acoustic music or something, which my music doesn't really fit into that category either. So I think Americana does a decent job of at least giving people some sense, although I don't really know what that is. Do you?
Not really, no.
I mean, I don't know, because it just, I think those terms are funny. I know that I love a good song, and at home I listen to a lot of jazz. I've been really influenced by a lot of jazz singers just as a singer. I really love country blues. I love rock and roll so much. And it's all mixed up in there. But at the heart of it for me is just the song and whatever I try to serve it, and hopefully the more I do it, the better I'll get at that.
Sure. Talk about your most recent album, Paradise Outlaw. You self-produced it. Was that a case of having your own vision of what you wanted and producing it yourself was the best way of achieving it?
I think so. Yeah, in a nutshell. And I, Bo, that also came from when I did Mercury. We had co-produced Mercury, and I had pretty strong ideas for that one as well. And I just remember when I was talking about Paradise Outlaw, I really knew which players I wanted to use. I knew where I wanted to do it. And Bo just said, I really think, he's like, and Bo's been really encouraging to me in that way, just saying, you've got great production ideas, you've got a great ear, you should just produce it yourself, and see what happens. And I really enjoyed that, actually. And I think too, just I finally had made enough records and done enough stuff in the studio to kind of actually feel like I could take that on, besides just like trying to get the songs out.
Sure. The banjo came more to the forefront on this record. Was that something apparent to you in the songwriting process or in the studio?
That was definitely in the songwriting. The songs that that are on there, that are on the banjo, I wrote those songs on the banjo, and that came about from when I did the North American tour with Mark Knopfler and his beautiful band. Musician Tim O'Brien. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tim O'Brien was in Mark's band, and for that tour, and I was sitting backstage one time in the dressing room, talking to Tim about banjos because my great grandfather played the banjo, and I've picked him up and fiddled around on him a little bit, off and on, and I told Tim, I said, I think I want to try picking up a banjo again. And he passed me this banjo back there, and I just caught a really strong spark off of it. And he gave me a tip for a banjo maker, this guy named Kevin Enoch. And when I got off that tour, I wrote the guy a message and just said, you got your basic, cheapest artist model. I really want to get one of your banjos. And he was really sweet and gave me a very kind artist deal, and I got that banjo, and I'm still playing it and writing songs on it and really trying to learn how to play it.
So if you had to place a theme on the Paradise Outlaw album, what would it be?
For some reason, I think of it as like a freedom album, and that might just be, I don't know if that makes sense from the outside to anyone else, but I think it was such a, when I was writing a lot of those songs, and then the couple of songs that I had written a long time ago that made their way on the album, it seemed so much about exploring, just kind of exploring forms and sounds, and rather than trying to craft a really great song, there was kind of a, I don't know if that makes any sense, sort of a restless energy, like I want to get at something and I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try.
Now, you mentioned earlier you'll be down here in Australia again shortly with Iris Dement.
Yeah, I'm really excited. That's in May. I think we're doing, right now it's 5 and maybe 6 shows, I think within 10 days or something.
And what will be the format of the shows? Are you both playing solo, or are you bringing musicians with you?
Yeah, I'll do a solo set to open, and then I've been doing quite a few shows with Iris, and then I usually go out and join Iris for some of her set, and I play guitar and banjo and do some singing and join in the fun.
Terrific.
And she plays mostly piano these days on her set, so it's pretty cool, pretty fun stuff.
And what's in your books for the remainder of 2015 after you leave us?
Well, I've just started the wheels on a new recording endeavor, which I'm pretty excited about. So I'll definitely be doing, kind of try to stay busy enough on the road, but I'm definitely going to really dig into doing some more recording and kind of that stuff. And I've had a lot of fun side projects in the last year or so, just collaborating with some other artists, like Calexico. I don't know if you know those guys, but
yes.
I wrote another song with Joey and got to sing on that album, and they're about to put that out. So there's some more things along those lines coming up, I think, that I'm excited about too.
Fantastic. Plenty to look forward to. Pieta, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure catching up with you.
Great. Thanks a lot. I'm really glad the Skype thing worked out.
It worked beautifully. It did.
And if you want to come to the show in Melbourne, just make sure you let somebody at Red House know, and we'll make sure to get you in there.
Oh, brilliant. Yes. We're looking forward to seeing you. You're always welcome here. You know that. And we're quite excited about the shows.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks a lot.
Okay. Take care, and we'll see you in May.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.